So Asif, we've spoken a lot about black swan events, first order, second order, third order, fourth order consequences. And we also spoke about like some future black swan events that could happen. I mean, last week was a perfect example of what could have been with that assassination attempt on Trump. Now, I know a lot of people will jump onto the bandwagon, talk about conspiracies and, why didn't the Secret Service do this, do that? I think steer away from that narrative and talking purely about the effects of what this would have happened is something that should be spoken about. I mean, first things first, last president to be an assassination attempt to be made was on Ronald Reagan. Prior to that was JFK. I think another president was shot. Roosevelt, I'm not too sure about that. But JFK was the last to actually pass away, and we saw the impacts it had. But I think that kind of highlights, like, had he not turned his head in that split second, this could have been a catastrophic event, not just for him, his family, his race for the presidency, but for the whole world. And the reason I say that is right now he's the most popular. He's most likely to get the presidency. He's got the vote of the majority of the country. What would that have done? The consequences of that would have been quite so catastrophic. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that would have. I think you've mentioned it actually when we did it, like when we did the Black Swan event videos. That
I don't think I have. I think we spoke about it personally.
Oh yeah, probably outside.
I think the way things are right now, like the tension in American politics and all over the world and what's happening, I think it shouldn't be a surprise that someone has made an attempt on a president's life. I mean, the same could be said about, and this kind of touches on the fact that even on Joe Biden, there could be an attempt, right? Or whatever, to get rid of him. So it's fascinating. Like, we were so close to a civil, like it could have been a civil war. I think a lot of people say there wouldn't have been a civil war, but I think if you put a lot of patriots that are sort of crazy to an extent without calling them full credit, I think a lot of people would have been civil about it, but all it takes is a few people to be uncivil and that's it.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, there'll be a lot of conflicts, especially amongst people in regards to that. And that, as you said, can lead to civil unrest and just that causes chaos across all sides, all angles. People protesting in like companies, people protesting in a lot of different areas.
Yep.
And it just creates a lot of division. And it's just like, and that escalates more and more. Division occurs, and then people start, like, crime rates, all these types of stuff to ramp up. So it becomes like almost like a catalyst for, like, I'd say our own, especially in the US, like their own destruction and demise. Yeah.
Well, it touches also on the fact that the weaknesses that have been identified with your security, like, conspiracies aside, the facts. Let's look at the facts of this. I think there was a shooter who climbed a ladder that got them. People were pointing out that there's someone there. Now, whether that message was given to the Secret Service, controlled system teams, whatever, separate story, not getting into it. But it really shows that an outdoor event, it showed weaknesses in the systems that are put in place. Like, maybe they did everything they could. Maybe they didn't. And there's a lot of possible reasons, etc. But it shows you that there's vulnerabilities in every point, regardless if you're you're the presidential candidate or whoever it is. There's vulnerabilities. It's about stamping those vulnerabilities out. But like, from a black swan perspective, this was, I think for a second the world was holding their breath, like, for a second, because I just don't want to imagine what would have happened from like the impacts it would have had.
What do you think would be like one of the worst impacts, like, immediately experienced, if that hypothetically did happen?
Conspiracies would be off the charts.
I just want to also mention, like, it sort of makes conspiracy theories in a way, as we talked about, can be also anti-fragile. Because like when you think about it, if they don't come out and say anything, right, then it's sort of people will start to build more and more conspiracy theories and they think it's true. But if they do, and if they don't say anything, then it makes it also people come out and make more conspiracy theories. So the whole idea of conspiracy theories is like anti-fragile. The only thing that can combat is truth that is backed by evidence as well as facts. It's like almost like what I'm trying to get at is like conspiracy theories is like sort of anti-fragile.
Yeah, I think I said it before. Like, I don't think people are surprised that there was an attempt on his life, right? Because of the political tension. And I mean, a population of 300 million, all it takes is one person to not like you to go all the way out to try to get rid of you. Now, some people might say, oh, well, it might be the CIA, it might be the Mossad, it might be the government, whatever it is. I mean, could it be? Maybe, maybe not. But what's more factual? That or potentially in a population of 300 million people, someone taking matters into their own hands. Now, there were security failures on the day as well. Now, that's pretty wild as well when you think about it. He showed the vulnerability again, how vulnerable one of the most important men in the world, and I say this because he's a presidential candidate, was at that point in time, right? And you're right, like maybe, I mean, they do plan for assassination attempts. So it's an interesting point you say that conspiracy theories sort of expose the anti-fragility because...
Like they are anti-fragile.
They are anti-fragile, yeah, because it allows you to prepare for what... Like, are you trying to get to the idea that it allows you to prepare?
What I'm really trying to say is like conspiracy theories just itself, like conspiracy theories are like anti-fragile.
Right.
As in, like, if you don't come out and say anything, people think like it's true. Like the conspiracy theories that they made up is true.
Right.
If you don't say anything, and people then come up with more and more conspiracy theories. It's like Hydra, basically. I'm not trying to say that it makes you anti-fragile. I'm trying to say the whole premise of conspiracy theories itself is anti-fragile.
Right.
Because when you think about it, like the number of conspiracy theories we've had in the last 5 years, 5 years, it's been just growing and growing more and more. It's because like they don't really respond to it. Like people don't really respond to it, or they don't know the truth. So I'm just saying, like it grows
exponentially over time. Yeah,
and that's what it is.
I think in this instance they're gonna have to come out and say something. Yeah. It's going to be investigated. It's going to be looked at. That's when the facts come out. See who's up. Like what's happened there. Why has security failed? Why has this guy turned at that exact point and been shot through the ear? Like, had he not turned his head, gone, like a live assassination?
And why did it have to come to that point where he had to do that? Because why couldn't security, like,
do something before?
Yeah. And I think the biggest focus of this is like the security, as you said.
Yeah.
Like, it's because it's their responsibility.
It's not who did it or how it was coordinated. It was what was security doing. That's the biggest takeaway. I agree.
And I think that's the biggest like point of action that should be taken, because things like this is going to happen, right? Like,
100%.
Whether it's Trump, whether it's someone else.
On both sides,
There's going to be a lot of attempts, right? As you said, like 300 million people, I think you said. Was
exactly. Yeah. I mean, all it takes is like a Trump supporter who, and this isn't a reflection of all Trump supporters, but you have good and bad on both sides, right? That's just the truth of it. And so all it takes is one bad person that supports Trump to make an attempt on a Democrat leader, and it can happen. It can happen. So it's not vulnerability of security just for Trump. It's vulnerability of security of, you're right, like of everyone,
And I think as you said, it sort of exposed like the fragility of the system. They weren't able to detect someone who's like it's not some elite specials. I would say I don't really know much of the details, but it's a kid or something, right? I'm not sure what.
20-year-old kid, registered Republican, so he was a registered Trump supporter. There's a lot coming out of it. He used an AR-15, which is like an automatic rifle from that distance. I don't think he had like a sight, so he's using iron sight.
Scope.
I don't think he had a scope. I don't think so. I don't think so. They say he pointed a gun at a police officer an hour before. police officer ran away. Again, speculation. I don't know. He's climbed up the ladder. People were calling out, hey, that there's a guy there with a gun climbing up thing. Nothing happens. People are calling it out 2-3 minutes before he's getting shot. Hey, there's a guy up the roof. Hey, again, there's a lot of things to unpack.
A lot of
there.
factors to unpack.
100%.
But as we said, like I think the bigger focus here is just like of the security system, the vulnerability of it, and how they can obviously improve and become. I guess in a way, it makes now security systems more tighter, and in a way, it makes them more. Hopefully, like they learn from it and anti-fragile.
Well, I think now if there was something set up against Trump, let's say, to get rid of him, you've just made it a lot harder to get to him, whoever it is, because his security is just going to be tightened to the T. Like outside rallies, they're going to have bulletproof glasses. There's going to, but who knows? Who knows? This is going to be a wild election year, and I think this is going to be quite fascinating how it goes. But you know what? There was a moment in history, like as much as you don't want to admit it and see it that way, like, when you see a history book, you see, Ronald Reagan was shot, or JFK was assassinated on this day in November, I think 22nd, 1973, or November something, 1973 something. So, history books are written on these events, and then you look at what happened there. We were part of history, like who how many people live in their lifetimes to go, everyone actually would have at some point. An assassination attempt on a president. I'm not saying it's cool to assassinate a president. I'm saying from a historical point of view, this was a very significant moment for everyone.
Yeah, definitely agreed. Yeah.
There was another sort of going on Black Swan events, and I think we've spoken a lot about this, like cyber warfare, World War III, civil unrest, rise of AI technology. Yesterday there was I was impacted, but do you want to talk about it a bit more as to what happened?
Yeah, sure. I was impacted. I think like everyone who's working at companies were impacted by it. It was like a outage, basically. It was like a global outage. And basically what happened was there was like a CrowdStrike, who are like some cybersecurity cloud service, I think, where they're for companies who provide like these services to secure and manage like their IT infrastructure. It's like IDs and things like that. And they basically had like this faulty update deployed to Microsoft Windows computers and devices. And that was like a bug, right? And that caused like the computer, I don't know if you experienced it, but it caused the computers to go through this infinite loop of blue screen of death. And it's not, they say it's not a cyber attack or anything. They say it's like a faulty update that they pushed. And then the impacts of that was experienced across so many sectors. Like it was across airlines, banking, healthcare, media, supermarkets, pretty much every company that uses this type of CrowdStrike system was exposed. And it just showed you how vulnerable a lot of these tech that we use, or like these companies use for the management of the IT are. Because the impacts from yesterday, apparently, according to reports, there was like around like 1,400 air flights that were cancelled.
Jeez.
This is across like US, Europe, and a lot of other countries.
Yikes.
And there was like a lot of obviously delays and stuff because the systems were down. Like the blue screen of death, you can't do anything, infinite loop. So it caused a lot of disruption. But that's like air travel. Then there's also like banking systems. Apparently in South Africa and like New Zealand as well. Like they experienced disruption, and it affected payment systems. Like couldn't do Pay ID or something for some services. So it led to transactional issues, especially even
can't pay money. You can't transact. You lose access to your money at that point.
Yeah.
Like your own money, your own funds that you have the rightful ownership on. You lose it.
Exactly. And
it's wild.
The craziest thing was also like with like hospitals.
Yeah.
Like they faced difficulties with like appointments because they use the system, so they couldn't get even patient records. They couldn't access it. So there's like that issue that was happening. And apparently like surgeries were cancelled in some locations because of like appointments and things like that.
Yikes.
So that caused that type of issue. And then there was like media broadcast disruptions that happened. They couldn't broadcast because they couldn't even access it. There's telecommunication failures. So it really affected like a lot of systems, a lot of companies, and it's global as well. I feel like probably millions and millions of computers were not able to function.
I mean, it touches on the fact you've spoken about it before, but all it takes is like one cyber event of that sort, and this was like a bug that was pushed, right? It wasn't even like a
faulty update, yeah.
Faulty update. So it wasn't even like let's put it in a better way, a weaponized feature or something or an update to go, hey, attach yourself to every single system and bang. Which is, yeah. I mean, everyone felt it. Like I know like everyone's laptop just shut down at work. From what I know, like there was a lot of impacts there, but I experienced that. My laptop just went into an infinite loop, and I was like, "What's this?" I'm like, "Meh." I had to join like meetings to my phone, which was interesting. But yeah, like it was. I mean, we've spoken about it so much, like cyber attacks, but the world is at mercy at that point.
I would say this is more scary than cyber attacks because cyber attacks, right, is with the intention of like causing, like it's with the intent of finding a vulnerability and exposing that.
Right.
But this was just like an update that they just patched, like they pushed. It's like what I'm trying to say is like this is like completely random, and it just completely shut down like 50% of like this is a bit of an exaggeration, but shut down majority of services that we use. And it just shows how even in randomness, our systems are so exposed and so vulnerable. Majority of like services were affected across like different industries, which is insane, and it's actually concerning that this is the case.
Do you think this was deliberate?
This is conspiracy theories.
No. Conspiracy aside, but do you think it was deliberate to maybe? Okay, let's look at it in the context. Do you think it was deliberate in the sense to test how vulnerable systems are?
They could do it in a much more safer environment, not to the point where it's like millions of computers, millions of people are affected by it, I think it does also say a lot about like testing, right? Like quality assurance. Like why wouldn't they go through the processes of just, like how could they push something like that across when they know like millions of people are going to be exposed? So whether it's deliberate or not, it seems quite strange. Definitely, I can't really say anything without any proof. It's intentional, but it really puts on the focus on making sure like quality assurance, testing, all these types of things are happening in place. And I think it's just going to cause a lot of companies to probably like now restructure a lot of how they manage their IT and infrastructure. Because it's exposed how centralized we are. If 50%, or like, I'm exaggerating here, but 50 to 80% of services, I mean, airlines, healthcare, supermarkets, everything is affected by just one fail update, then we can't even operate if one fail update happens, like with our daily tasks that we need to do. So it shows how centralized we are. Like airlines, telecommunications, they're all using the same thing. We need to start to, like, I can't speak on behalf of all these companies, but we need to start to think of how can we become more decentralized in that aspect.
Crypto.
No, saying
Decentralized crypto money. It's the way of the future. Well, Bitcoin. Ethereum, buy Ethereum, guys. It's the bet. No, don't do that. I'm joking.
But like it's basically like the idea of just diversifying and just like decentralizing some of our infrastructure and architecture of tech.
Is that possible though? Because Microsoft being a powerhouse, and what other system can you sort of get away from centralizing?
So the thing is, this isn't a Microsoft issue. Even Microsoft came out and said it's not our issue. It's not our problem.
Okay.
It's like the IDs, like the IT management, like your computers and everything, like the IDs and stuff you use. They use a service, like a third party service called CrowdStrike. So it's like they use that from They basically use that to manage like your ID credentials and all those types of things, maybe.
Oh,
So it's not a Microsoft issue.
So
it's
why did
that,
Microsoft get the blame for this?
It's not actually Microsoft's problem. It's actually because CrowdStrike pushed an update for Windows computers.
But who's responsible for CrowdStrike? Microsoft, right?
No, that's CrowdStrike. They're their own entity.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Everyone was shitting on Microsoft, which is interesting.
Because the update was pushed to Microsoft computers. That's why the CEO came out as like, it's not a Microsoft problem, it's CrowdStrike. And that's why my Mac wasn't affected.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know what that makes you think about is the importance of, you can't control how companies, I would say, decentralizing companies' infrastructure at scales, it's a whole process. But what it did make me think is like I could decentralize my own thing, like myself, like my system, instead of just having just Windows, have Mac, and I also have like this other thing called like Linux,
right?
Like this small little computer which I carry. It's just like the size of my palm. So yeah, it's called a Raspberry Pi.
Oh yeah,
I can then use that as well. Like if Mac or Windows fails, it's all right. I got like my Linux thing, so I can still use the internet. So it's like decentralizing parts of your life. I mean, this is not a financial advice or anything, so don't take anything that I say here as financial advice. But like with even money, like distributing it across different types of forms, whether it be gold or watches or something else, such that if your online digital system doesn't work for some reason, something goes down, then it's all right. You can still manage your day to day, like having cash and stuff on hand. It's going to be useful for situations like this. Like imagine you had to immediately go buy groceries, but you couldn't because like the digital system didn't work. But then you had cash on hand, so you can just pay, just go get it front.
Well, you've heard the conspiracy about cash, have you? No, I mean, yeah, you're right. I think it forces you to diversify yourself instead of relying on companies to do it. But I think that's the thing. We're so used to people doing things for us that we forget about things like that. But maybe it is financial advice to go buy a Mac. Buy Apple products because
I mean I would say it's just diversifying your just the way you do things, as then it will make you less fragile.
Yeah, I agree
as well, because then you're not exposed to these types of situations. I mean, so I guess like with decentralization, from a practical perspective, like think about it from your own life. If this black swan event happens, Windows computer's gone, how am I going to operate? Or if my Android is destroyed, how am I going to operate? And so I'm sort of like doubling up on things. Just in case something happens, at least I'm still operable. I can still operate.
Yeah.
I'm not vulnerable to a single system that's tied to this.
Yeah, quite wild, actually. I was writing up all these conspiracies in the group chat. It's so funny. But I probably shouldn't have. If someone said, watch people blame this on China or Russia. It's like...
Yeah, I'm just... you can get caught up in that, and it's fun. It's fun, it's fun to do that. But I'm just thinking like, okay, what's more practical? What can I do?
Yeah, exactly.
What is this a lesson for? And I'm just like, okay, I've got ideas in my head of what I can do. To basically where it's like, oh, if things happen like this, it's not going to really affect me as much.
But how do you do that for like Trump's assassination then? Diversify
that's completely different. Diversify your security. Don't just have people have like some, I don't know. Well, I think the most important aspect in that would be information. How quickly you're able to get information and distribution of information as accurately as possible.
You know what's wild? I think the minute he was shot, within 3 or 4 minutes, there were videos on YouTube, like live streaming.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lady behind him that was like recording.
Yeah,
which is wild. Like people, people just.
You know what was really surprising about that?
Yeah,
you'd expect shooting people to start running around chaos. Everyone just stood there,
and they're just recording.
Yeah, just recording and then it's like, are we that desensitized?
Yeah. That's scary.
Are we that desensitized that the moment we hear gunshots, we're like, oh yeah, maybe it's just Americans because, guns, Second Amendment. No offense, but yeah, it just like, it wasn't calming, but everyone was like, eh. And then when he gets up and puts his hand up and that was a pretty wild moment, but it's a courageous moment, I would say, to get up from that. But again, it's something at least Trump would do, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it was just surprising how desensitized, like how non-reactive they were.
I did hear screams and stuff.
That is true.
But it's just surprising to see people, even in the circumstance of death, are like recording. Because that lady was still recording. Like
Yeah.
her life was just, she was more worried about getting the recording than her life at that point. And
Yeah.
I was just like, it's just crazy how some people operate like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really Americans. I think it's just, as a populace, like we've become desensitized. We're just worried. We're just focused on this media so much. Like even this is a bit external, but there was like a situation of someone I met who said like he has like all these tattoos and stuff like that. And basically he was just, there's like an old man. He's just walking by. He's in his car, right? The guy who's got tattoos. He's just in his car chilling. And then this old man was walking by, and he sort of gave him this eye contact where it's just like he looked a bit intimidated by them. But then he was just walking regularly, and then all of a sudden he fell, and his head hit the ground, and he's just like bleeding, right? And everyone around him was just walking by. No one helped. And so the guy with tattoos in the car got out and helped him, and actually called the ambulance and got him to the hospital and everything. And the old man said like, "Oh, I'm sorry that I misjudged you. Like I thought you were like this intimidating gangster, but you're actually a very kind person that actually helped me." And he was like, I talked to the guy, right? And he told me that everyone around him was just walking by. Like no one wanted to help, no one wanted to be involved.
Wow.
But I was the only person that actually got out and helped him. Like he's just saying like how people are like, they
just don't give a shit.
They don't care, yeah.
Yeah, they just don't
I was just
care.
like, wow, that's crazy.
See an
sad
old
to hear
guy
that.
fall, hit his head.
Yeah, he's bleeding.
don't
He
care.
could have died basically.
He
If he
could've.
didn't act immediately, he could have died. And the person he least expected helping him actually helped him.
Yeah.
Which is just insane. It's crazy. Yeah, I think we've really become desensitized. It's almost when you think about it, like people's, I'd say instinct now is to get the phone out.
Yeah.
Like when you have an argument, the instinct is like, let me get my phone out and record this as evidence. But it's like, why don't we just resolve this and try to talk as like human? But when you go anywhere, it's just instinct. It's just, yeah.
Phone out, record evidence, court, police, prosecutor, jail, death.
Exactly. Yeah, you summarized it pretty well. Wow. Yeah.